This is Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. Thanks so much for joining us. My name's Doig. I'm the founder of Money Tips, getting more money into your pocket, more time in your day, and more happiness in your life. 2023, what are the opportunities? What are the threats? This is what we're going through in today's episode. So thanks so much for joining us. Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. So it's what a year 2022 has been, and there's been so much happening. And if you didn't already have a look at my video, I did a prediction for 2022 way back in 2021. I was asked to speak at the London Investors Show in front of 100 people, and about 50 to 100 people, and basically gave my predictions, what I thought was happening. And I'll link a video to my predictions in the comments or in one of the screens around you. And yeah, I was pretty pleased. I got it pretty much 9 out of 10 predictions were right. So it's put a lot of pressure on me to get these predictions right for 2023. I've had a bit of analysis paralysis because so much is happening, but I've kind of deep dived into a lot of reports, a lot of kind of papers that people are predicting, and I'm going to give my kind of thoughts of the biggest opportunities, the biggest threats that I see happening, the kind of strengths and the weaknesses of the economy. And yeah, there's been a lot that's been happening. So let's get right into it. I've got about 10 kind of themes that I think are going to be quite impactful for your life. This is, before I start, this is guidance, not advice. This is education. These are just my kind of thoughts. Don't take this as financial advice. Do your own research. These are not tips, but I'm just going to give about kind of 10 kind of areas where I think I'm going to break it down into kind of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So stay right to the end. And we're going to go right into it. So number one, I think, is going to be automation. This is probably almost an obvious choice, but I think some of the obvious choices that are kind of the best ones happening. If you haven't been practicing with kind of chat GPT, where have you been? It's kind of, it's everywhere on TikTok. I'm in a technology business. Money Tips is an education technology company. And this is going to be quite an impactful new tool that people have been using. So how is this going to impact people's lives? So it's going to make lives easier. This is the good thing. So there are good things and bad things. But on the flip side, there's going to be a lot of jobs that are going to be outsourced to chat GPT, and that it's going to be outsourced into AI. If you look at any of the tech jobs out there, there's been a lot of cuts. I know BuzzFeed have made quite a few people redundant because they're using chat GPT instead of the humans to create their own content. As a business, an education business myself, it's much easier to create content using AI. Fun enough, actually, to prepare for this episode, I actually said to ChatGPT, what are going to be the 10 most impactful? I asked that question, what are going to be the most 10 impactful themes of 2023? And it came up with some pretty good answers. I have to say, the downside to AI, it's not as, they're kind of stock answers. They're kind of very generic answers that, yeah, they're good. Any kind of search on the internet is going to find these answers, but it's without a doubt, it's going to get better, and it's going to impact a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of jobs that are going to be taken over by AI. So as an investor, you have to almost think about this from a different point of view. It's a different mindset. This channel is called Millennial Money Mindset. So from a point of view, you have to be thinking, actually, how can I profit from this? And there's loads of ways to profit from this new AI tool. So look at companies that are going to benefit. There's huge amounts of companies that are going to benefit. Microsoft they've bought billions of pounds. They've spent billions of pounds into this unique software itself. So how are you as an investor going to benefit? So, and there are huge other, there are companies going to make lots of money from AI. There's a company called Nvidia, Nvida. I hadn't even heard of it before, but I did a bit of research, and it's basically making money from, I think they do the chips for the automation. So that's going to be a huge kind of benefit for this company, the growth of AI. There's another one called I don't even know how to pronounce it, Pllantar. This is Palantria, I want to say, but yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that. But essentially, they're looking at data and decisions. So these companies are going to do great guns with kind of the growing tendency for AI. So it's going to make everything easier. Think of it like having a robot in your room with you. Think of it like C-3PO from Star Wars, that the kind of that guy walking around with you, the golden, robot who's going to basically walk around with you. And if you think of him in Star Wars, he knows, like, I don't know, thousands of languages. He can answer any questions, but he doesn't have the kind of the heart of like Han Solo, if you get that analogy. So AI is going to be a great tool to use in your day-to-day job. You're going to be, if you're creating content, you can ask this content creator in your back pocket to make your life easier. It's going to create, so many things. If you're a coder, I tried to code for my website a compound interest calculator, and it literally did it in seconds. It's amazing. So definitely that's one for the future, AI automation. And think, how can you benefit yourself? If you're not using it, then someone else will be. So if your job's going to be replaced, it's not going to get replaced by AI. It's going to be replaced by someone using AI. So that's one of the things. So that's almost a scary one to start with, but it's an important one. So from some of the themes that we talked about in the last year's video, in 2020, prediction for 2022, change is happening quicker than ever. And this is the same theme. It's still happening. I mean, we're in the fourth industrial revolution. So is going to be a convergence of new technologies coming in together. And this is going to be massive. So we're moving from an information age to a knowledge age. So we had the agricultural age, we had the industrial age, then we had the kind of the computing age with information at our fingertips with the internet, and now we're moving to a different age. This is a kind of a mindset shift that we have to get around, and we're moving to a knowledge economy where you can learn to do anything. You can learn to write a book. I wrote a book, Millennial Money Mindset, and one of the courses I took was from Udemy, and I just picked up that course, and she was a Cambridge professor who taught this at Cambridge, writing at Cambridge, and she's put a course on Udemy, and she gives the same lectures to someone on Udemy paying £20 to someone who studies at Cambridge University who has to go through a whole load of criteria to get there. So we have more information than ever, and this is great news if you can use it for your benefit. But on the flip side, this can be quite scary if this is going to outsource your job. And we're closer than ever. We are a global world, and this information is accessible for anyone around the world, even if you're in India or Islington. So it's going to be kind of interesting time. So that's kind of number one. And kind of number two, with changes happening faster than ever before. And this is a continuing theme from 2022, and it's going to continue into 2023. So the next topic is energy. So energy has been a topic for last year as well, but it's going to continue. Essentially, the demand for energy is increasing. So we're using laptops more than ever before. We're using, we want to travel faster. We're using more kind of goods, consumer goods than ever before. And the world, if you think of countries like India, China, they're using more technology. They're using more cars. They're using all this energy. They're getting more and more hungry using energy. And this is a global demand is increasing for energy. And the supply of energy, easy access energy, has been decreasing, especially with Russia, essentially a huge energy source there, with the war in Russia and Ukraine, a lot of that supply has been reduced. And if you've ever studied economics, if the demand increases and the supply decreases, that's going to increase prices. But on the flip side, if you understand the USA used to be a huge importer of energy. So if you think back to the Iraq War, and that was basically down to oil, or they say it was stability in the area. But Iraq was a huge exporter of oil, and USA essentially wanted to control that area, that region, and which is why that was down to the Iraq War. And essentially, but what has happened since then, in the last 5-10 years, there's been a discovery of shale gas, which is kind of fracking, and this is onshore gas, which has revolutionized the USA energy determination. So essentially, they used to be a net importer of oil, and now they're thinking of exporting oil. So there used to be huge amounts of LNG, which is liquid natural gas terminals, that was set up on the ports of USA as to import. It was originally going to import energy, gas, or oil into the country. But since this shale gas has been found, they're net exporters of gas, which is crazy. You would never have expected that 10, 20 years ago. And so this is huge. So this is going to have a big impact. So the other area of energy that we should be looking at is renewable energy, and if this can keep up with the reduction of coal. So coal power fire stations are reducing, and essentially coal creates huge amounts of CO2 releases, and a lot of developed countries like Germany, they switched off coal-fired power stations. They have now turned a lot of them back on, but essentially they want to reduce the use of carbon intensive energy and switch it to renewable energies. And this is going to be a huge shift in 2022 and into 2023. So in 2022, there was a record amount of wind energy in the UK, and this is huge. So I've got some figures here, but the amount of energy. So 26.8% of UK energy source in Great Britain was produced by wind in 2022. And that was huge compared to gas, which if you think about, you turn your taps on when you cook, that's natural gas. A lot of that comes from the North Sea or Norway or Russia. So that produces the total generation by source for UK is 38.8%. And so essentially wind energy is going to increase a huge amount. So there's huge amounts of offshore wind energy, which is coming online in 2022 and 2023. And this is hopefully going to overtake coal, which is reducing in the UK. So that's number two. Essentially, energy usage is going to increase. Energy usage increase and the supply of energy. So this is going to be interesting to see what happens in 2023. And another thing we'll be interested is how we store that electricity. If we can store, the problem with electricity, you can't store it. So when it's generated, it has to essentially get used up instantly. I used to work for Shell Energy, and I worked on the gas side. I used to trade natural gas. I used to buy and sell millions of pounds worth of gas each day. And the problem with electricity is you can't store it, but there's huge amounts of investment going into storage of electricity and energy. And if we can store that energy, then that's kind of a golden bullet that we can solve. But that still hasn't been done effectively or cost efficiently. So that's going to be a big theme in 2023. And there's a number of different ways you can kind of play this out. You can try and switch your energy to as a consumer, you can try and find the cheapest gas or cheapest energy supplier. That's going to save you hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. There are other companies I really like, a few energy players that essentially you can buy. As we always say on this channel, don't buy single companies. You can buy kind of funds or trackers. So have a look at commodities, which might be interesting. Kind of a gas commodity player, LNG shippers. These might be interesting. Wind producers. But yeah, this might be an interesting theme in 2023. And higher prices will knock on to inflation. So inflation is the spending power in your back pocket. So inflation expectation is expected to come down in 2023, which is good news, but it's not coming down to anything like 2 or 3 years ago, where central banks have a target of around 2% of inflation. So we're likely to be in a high inflation environment for a number of years because of the high energy costs, supply chain problems still with coronavirus, Ukraine war. But the main reason for inflation is the printing of money. This is one thing they're not talking about in the press, in the commentators. Yeah, it's 375 billion pounds of money was printed by the Bank of England, and even more with that in the USA after to try and get through coronavirus, to try and put people on to pay for people going on furlough. Huge amounts of money was printed, and this is going to have a knock-on effect in inflation. So inflation is essentially the purchasing power of money. So essentially, how much for your weekly shop, how much can you pay with £20, with £30? And the price of goods in the UK and all around the world has increased. So this is going to have an impact on the UK economy. So what central banks have done all around the world, they've increased inflation. And this is the borrowing power. This is the borrowing cost, of money. So we've lived since the 2008 financial crash, where interest rates were dropped down to near zero and negative interest rates in places like Japan. We've been in a low interest rate in environment for many years, for a decade. And now interest rates have risen, the cost of borrowing money has increased, and this is going to have a knock-on effect to businesses. So the cost of borrowing money, so if a business wants to expand, they can borrow money. So for instance, if Tesco's want to build a new shop, a new superstore, they can essentially purchase this new shop using borrowed money. So they would go to a bond, they would have what they call corporate bond, and they would lend money and they pay it back over 10, 20 years time. But the cost to do that has increased with this interest rates. So this means that businesses might not expand because of this increased cost. So Tesco, to use this example, may not decide to build that new shop, may not build that, or a business might not expand because of this rising cost, and because of that, there's not going to be jobs to build those that new shop. There's not going to be people paying for goods, and there's not going to be people being employed, which is increasing tax, and this is going to have a knock-on effect in the economy, where if people aren't employed, then they're not going to pay for services, and this can basically be like a downward spiral. This can be a negative thing for the economy. So high interest rates can have an impact on the GDP. So that's the inflation, the printing of money, supply chains, the increase in interest rates. So, and another thing to note, but governments do benefit from high inflation. This is another thing that commentators are missing in out there. I haven't even seen this mentioned once, but governments benefit from high inflation because it erodes their government debt. So debt is borrowed money, and governments all around the world, especially in developed countries, have huge amounts of debt that they've borrowed over decades, and essentially they need to pay back this debt. And it's essentially like a hangover. They've drunk too much, and the hangover is from borrowing too much. From the good times, they've basically borrowed, over leveraged, and they now need to pay back this debt. And high inflation erodes this debt. So imagine if you've got, I don't know, £1 million on a government, it's going to be much more than this, but £1 million, and that's getting eroded 10% every year by inflation. So that debt is essentially reducing in real terms. So this is a good thing for a government, and which is probably why the governments, which are the central bank's bosses, held off from increasing interest rates for so long. And we've got this kind of knock-on effect of inflation, which is affecting people real time. As you go out to the shop, people are feeling the pinch in your wallet and your handbags all over up and down the country. So if you're in a fixed salary, for instance, if you're a teacher or a nurse or a firefighter, then and you've got a set wage every, set salary. This is even if you get a 1% rise. If inflation's at 2%, you're effectively getting a 9% pay cut, and this is really painful for a lot of people. And this is going to have a knock-on effect on the economy. So if that means that people aren't going. If people are feeling poorer, they're not going to go out and spend that luxury. They're not going to go and have that takeaway, which is going to have, create jobs for the people in that restaurant. If they're not going to go out and spend money, then people in shops aren't going to get employed. And this is going to have a negative effect on the economy. So I've got some more facts here. And so essentially the GDP growth, so it's expected. So I did a bit of research, and so this is really feeling a pain in the UK. So the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, did a forecast for GDP growth in 2023. So quarter four versus percentage versus quarter four growth from 2022. So the UK economy is expected to be reduced GDP growth, which is obviously bad news for the economy. Canada is expected to grow 3%, USA just under 3%, Japan just under 3%, France is just under, let me correct that. So Canada just over 1%, USA just under 1%, Japan and France just under 1% growth. And the world economy, which is what I was reading previously, is going to grow by 3%. So that's pretty meager economic growth around the world. But the UK lagging behind, just under growth of negative 1%. And this is down to a lot of things, but mainly Brexit. People in commentators in the media not talking about how much of an impact Brexit having. If we're not doing deals with Europe, with our kind of counterparties, then this is obviously a negative growth. We're not exporting our goods anymore. If it's the red tape to sell goods in the UK, this is going to have an impact on the economy. If people aren't visiting Europe, if people aren't visiting from Europe to the UK, this is a negative impact on the economy, and this is all going to have a negative impact. So what can you do to mitigate this? So it's great news as an investor. You can invest all around the world. So don't just get caught up in the UK economy. So here in the UK, we get kind of home bias. We can think of just investing in the FTSE 100, which is the 100 biggest shares, 100 biggest companies, that the UK listed on the UK stock market. But we can invest all around the world, which is amazing. Look at India, look at China, look at Brazil. There are huge amounts of growth. Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria, massive growth in these areas. As an investor, it's so easy to put your money in these kind of growing areas. This is higher risk, but also higher reward, and you need a much longer kind of time frame for these kind of growing countries to grow and kind of mature. And there might be a bit of volatility as well. So if you look at Russia as well, which is known as kind of an emerging market, this with the war, obviously, if you own Russian companies in the Russian stock market, that's going to be hammered mainly because of the war, and it's not trading. There's sanctions on Russia, for instance. So yeah, it's going to have a massive impact on, if you're a Russian shareholder, that's going to have a big impact. So there's risk with these emerging markets, with these less kind of stable countries like USA, UK, Australia, for instance. So just to be aware, but there's huge opportunity there as well. So yeah, interest rates we talked about. So higher cost to borrow, so less business opportunities. So less businesses are going to grow and expand, especially in the UK. So let's move to house prices. So house prices, another one. So I did a video about house prices that are looking like they're going to crash. I did a lot of research and speaking to the commentators, and I think house prices are going to crash. One of the biggest opportunities I see is in commercial property. So commercial, there's two types of property that you can invest in. So if you can invest in retail, so residential, where people live, the roof over your head, that's what's talked about in Rightmove. If you look at the kind of Halifax, these nationwide, these kind of indexes that are always talked about. But what is not talked about is commercial property, and there's huge opportunity in commercial opportunity. So if you're, there's going to, I think, if you think, come back, so supply and demand, especially in property. So if you think of the supply in London, especially, huge amounts of building works going on. Just take a bus around London. There's so much building work going on. All these offices that have been built over the last 10, 15 years. And the supply of offices, the demand for people in offices has dropped massively. So many people are working from home today. You can do so many jobs today can be done at home. So if you're a lawyer, if you're in publishing, if you're in any a call center, a lot of these work can actually be done before. So the pandemic has kind of fast-tracked a lot of these works that can be done from home really easily. You can do it from a laptop and a good internet connection, which means that you don't need to go to the office. People go to the office now maybe once or twice a week, down from 5 times a week. So the number of bums and seats has reduced massively, and that's all over London, and that's all over the world. So the pandemic it's meant that people can now do business from using Zoom, using Teams, just using a telephone, using a laptop connection. And this is a knock-on effect to commercial property, especially office buildings. And if you think of all those people that don't need to travel into London, there's going to have an impact on services that are servicing these office workers. So if you think of everyone who goes into the office might buy a sandwich, they might go to the gym, they might go to drinks after work. And this is going to reduce massively, and this is going to have an impact on commercial property. So but saying that, on the flip side, I love using a flip side on commercial property. We all buy stuff online now. So think of Amazon. So this all needs to be stored somewhere, and warehouse space. There's been a huge demand for warehouse space. So I'm an author. My book, Millennial Money Mindset, I have print on demand, and these books need to be stored somewhere. They're stored in an Amazon warehouse somewhere. They're not stored in my house anymore, which is brilliant. But if you're at home, say for instance, go buy my book, Millennial Money Mindset, click a button, and somewhere in the UK, there's a book there on a shelf that will be sent to you in the mail. You can do it in a day, actually, if you use Amazon fast track service, and that will be in your hands in a day. But that book has to be stored somewhere, and this is all warehouse space. So this costs money, but you as an investor can invest in the warehouse space, and that's something to be aware of. So I do think there's going to be a crash in retail property, especially in London. I think London has been overpriced for so long, and people can work from wherever. People can work in Devon for 2 days a week and then go and rent in London for 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And you don't need to have that demand of living in London anymore. And that's going to have an impact on the residential property. So another factor, I think, is a demographic. Which is the population. So I'm a geographer. I studied geography at university. And one of the things you look at is demographic trends. And so what are people doing? How many people are around the world? So there was a huge milestone in 2022. And that was the world population reached 8 billion people, which is crazy. 8 billion people all around the world. And this has basically meant that looking at demographics, and this is going to affect businesses. So you're looking at demographics, think of it like the baby boomers. So baby boomers were the people born in 1945 on to the 1950s after the Second World War. There's a huge amount of people wanted to have children after the war. They came back from war and said, actually, I don't want to just have a settled life. And there was a huge influx of people being born around this time. And these baby boomers in 2023 are now retiring. So look at what baby boomers are buying. Maybe this is health. They're looking for health trends. Maybe they're looking to go on cruises. Maybe they want to have more holidays. Maybe they're playing more golf and having more leisure time. And this is going to have an impact on your investments. So it's worth thinking about the demographics. This is mainly in developed countries where USA, UK, Australia, Europe, where they have these kind of baby boomers. In, say, for instance, China, look at their demographics. They had a policy called a one-child policy in the 60s, where the government restricted more than one child being born. So this is have a huge impact. There's many people now in their 20s, 30s, 40s who just have one. They don't have any brothers or sisters. They're just that one person in that family, and this is going to have an impact. It's kind of, they call it the little emperor syndrome, where they put all their eggs in one basket. Essentially, they want to have this child. They give all the investments to that child. They give all the education, all their time, all their love and attention into this one child. And this is going to create kind of a huge kind of, I guess, like an A-type personality, where they're kind of driven and actually want to prove themselves to their parents. And this is going to be quite interesting in China, which is one child, how this kind of one-child policy experiment kind of what happens with this one-child policy, how it develops. So that's interesting. Another factor, I think we talked a lot about Bitcoin on this channel, Millennial Money Mindset, but I think the blockchain technology is actually going to create businesses in 2023. They're going to create businesses that are going to solve meaningful problems. So Bitcoin had a horrible year in 2022. It kind of took a battering. NFT took a battering because there was so much hype, kind of a lot of scams that were kind of built up that didn't actually have intrinsic value in the factors into the price. But blockchain is going to actually start solving meaningful problems. Web 3.0, where you have this ownership of Web 3.0. I've got a video on what is an NFT, what is Web 3.0. Have a look at that if you want to know more information on that. But yeah, I think blockchain is actually going to solve meaningful problems. So look at kind of companies that are set up using blockchain. This is going to be an interesting theme going 2023 and beyond. It's the way I think of it. It's like when double entry bookkeeping was invented in the Renaissance period in the 16th century. Essentially, blockchain technology is like triple entry bookkeeping. It's going to be a huge, it's going to enable a lot of businesses to create and solve a lot of problems. And this is going to be really exciting. So another thing, cannabis would be another thing that I'm thinking of. So cannabis stocks might be quite an interesting theme in 2023. So Canada has now legalized it. There's a number of states in the USA legalized it. It's going to happen. It's going to be legalized in the UK. There's a number of different, go around London, there's these CBD shops. Is it CBD? I don't even know what it stands for, but it's essentially like the cannabis, but it doesn't have the TBC. Basically, it doesn't give you the high of a cannabis. But this is, they sell these as kind of like, they reduce your anxiety. And this is in the UK anyway. In Canada, cannabis is totally legal. It's totally normal to go and smoke cannabis at your local shop. I've got a friend in Canada. He just says they just sell it at a local kind of store, just a local, local supermarket. It's obviously been legalized in Netherlands for many years, in Amsterdam. But I think 2023, there's a lot of companies that are going to do well out of this now that it's going to come almost legalize. Before, these companies couldn't make a profit because of, say, for instance, in the USA, even though it's legalized in a number of different states, California, for instance, it couldn't compete with the illegal business, because the illegal business had so many established supply chains. They had their customers already sorted, and legal businesses that are now selling cannabis couldn't compete with them because they've got to pay for taxes and they've got to be regulated, highly regulated cannabis, this new industry, and they couldn't compete with the illegal business. But as the illegal business is kind of closed down and the legal side of this takes over, these companies are actually going to start make a profit, and actually it's going to be it's going to be looking quite interesting. So that's another thing that I think is going to be interesting. India, I think I'm a big fan of India. I have shares in India. That's going to be a huge growth area. I think if you're looking to take a bit more risk, that would be a great way to diversify your portfolio into India. huge young population, massively. I think they'll reach 1 billion people in India. Massive educated population, can speak English, huge technology base, huge service base. Yeah, I think India will be a great way to invest. I think in the UK, I think it's going to be a K-shaped recovery. So the rich are going to get richer and the poor are going to get poorer. And unless the government step in and take action, a conservative government, conservative government is essentially set up for the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer. This is going to lead to a lot of animosity. It's going to lead to a lot of strikes. It's going to lead to a lot of protests. This is all going to increase. I think I said this in 2022. That will happen in 2022. Look at all the strikes that are happening. Basically, every public sector area is striking. It's going to go on. It's going to continue into 2023 as well. The government are trying to ban protest. There's got a protest ban in the House of Lords as we speak. I think it's happening today, and they're basically trying to outlaw people protesting, which is absolutely crazy. I'm not going to get too much into politics today, but the Conservative government are trying to outlaw people protesting, which I think is a fundamental human right. But yeah, that's the kind of craziness, the dystopia world we live in at the moment. So to sum up, let's go quickly through the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and threats. So the strengths, so we're in a new industrial revolution. Things are going to happen faster than ever before. So this is no better time to live than today. Look at, if you want to start, if you're thinking, no, I can't afford to invest, look at some of these growth areas. Find a job in these areas. Where I started my investment, I started in shipping in the 2000s. Look at the kind of where China was just opening up. It was a booming business, a booming industry, and it makes life so much easier. It makes getting promoted so much easier if you're in a booming industry, compared to that to when I got made redundant in 2015, where the gas industry was in dismal times because there was so much supply. Obviously, it's now in 2022, 2023, the gas industry is booming again. But I got made redundant at that time because it was bad times in the gas industry, the energy industry. So look for these areas of opportunity. Look for where you can learn new skills. It's never been easier to learn new skills, learn to invest, learn. As we said, it's never been easier to get a course on Udemy. I've got a course on how to invest on Udemy. It's never been easier to learn how to do a new skill. The world is getting better globally. So although we're talking loads of stuff about kind of the downside of the world, and more people are coming out of poverty, more people can read and write, more people have access to clean water, more people have access to education. We're living longer. The people today, it's going to be likely they're going to live until 100. This is great news, and this is all good stuff compared to imagine living 100 years ago. So even the downsides we talk about today, it's not even in comparison to the downsides to 100 years ago. So the weaknesses we talk about. So the UK economy is slowing. If you're in the UK economy, it's going to be bad times for some areas of growth in jobs and growth. It's going to be negative growth. The government, I think, the Conservative government is a weakness. I think if you look at their policy on paper, it's a disaster going forward. I think if you're going to be in the UK in 10 years' time, these policies are they're an absolute car crash. And it's the Conservative government are policies for people in power now and people who are in the ruling classes and the ownership classes rather than the people who are actually working. So I think as we are in 2023, we have a Conservative government. I think it's a huge weakness and a Brexit as well is a disaster. And yeah, we're feeling the effects of the people who voted for Brexit whenever it was in 2016. So we're feeling the effects of it today. The stats speak for themselves. So, and in the UK, we're in national mourning. The Queen died in 2022, and we still haven't kind of got over it. We're not really talking about what happened with the Queen, the monarchy, what's going to happen with the monarchy. We have Prince Charles III, and we're going to have, it's a strange world we're living. The aristocracy owns a third of the land in the UK, which seems crazy to me. yeah, we're in a kind of a land that is, we've got kind of, we have a kind of a setup which is built for kind of 200 years ago, where if we're thinking in the future, potentially what we're going to do with the monarchy, I think would be much better from, in my personal view, take their assets and put it into a UK global fund and pay, use that to pay for a universal basic income. I think would be a much smarter use of resources. Look to Norway's look at what they've done with their oil reserves. If they've actually used it to support the people, give much better healthcare, give much better schooling, give much better roads and infrastructure. Or Japan have done the same. They've got a huge pension fund. If we could do that with the monarchy, and I think that would be a better use of money. So that's another thing. Just the weaknesses. Property, I think, is going to have a tough time in 2023. But if you're a smart investor, you can swoop in and get a bargain. It's never been a better time to get a bargain in property. So look at opportunity. So we're in the fourth industrial revolution. There's going to be so much opportunity. We're moving from an information age to a knowledge age. There's things like ChatGPT. If you use these tools for your job, these are going to be a massive benefit for you. So there is big problems to solve. So if these are big, we're in a world of huge problems, and business is all about solving these problems. So you as an individual could solve these problems and create huge amounts of value for people's lives. So big threats. China is a big dragon, sleeping dragon. Potentially Taiwan is there. If they invade Taiwan, that could be huge problems. Sri Lanka is another one where India, could potentially be huge threats there. Russia, huge threats, global problems with nuclear, the threat of nuclear war. Iran could be another one where they arrested a woman for not wearing her burqa correctly. I think, I can't remember all the details, but basically it was a big protest there because a woman wasn't wearing her burqa correctly, or something like that, which is kind of seems insane for anyone who is in the kind of modern, someone living in a city like London or Oxford, where I'm living at the moment, which seems like somewhere in the world that could happen, where we're not in an equal world, where we're not, women don't have the same rights as men. It seems kind of crazy, but this is the world we're living in. So that could be a huge threat there. Energy crisis could get worse. There could be, have a cold winter in 2023 and don't have the supply. We could have not enough wind blowing that could take up that slack. So there's lots of threats there. Another theme for 2023 is Scotland. So the independence Scotland have a huge ace card. They are in a big power position, and they, especially with the Scottish National Party, want to be independent country. If you look at Scotland, they're in a much more powerful position than they have ever been. They have huge amounts of energy. If they nationalise, if they go independent, the North Sea oil reserves could last decades if Scotland use it. They have huge amounts of water supply. People don't really talk about this in the media. There's more water in Loch Ness than all of the water in England. And water, if you think of a huge threat for around the world, it's the water supply. So we forget how much we need water. I have a cup here for water, and we drink it every day. So it's a huge threat if we don't manage those resources correctly. And also nuclear power. So Scotland hold the nuclear submarines in the deep locks, because they can have the submarines can kind of it's kind of the best port for them to be stationed. And if if Scotland go independent, then this is a knock-on effect on the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Trade Organization, where essentially they have access to the waters, and they have basically, if Scotland go independent, they would be out of NATO, and they don't have the that would mean that they wouldn't essentially be able to use the Scottish waters to use the essentially tracking Russian submarines. So Scotland independence could be a huge theme for 2023. I think Scotland hold a huge trump hand. They've got really power position, and I don't think England appreciate it. I consider myself British. My parents are Scottish. I live in England my whole life, but I don't think England appreciate the power position that Scotland hold. So that's me. I'm going to wrap up. So hopefully this has been useful. Please like, please subscribe, send this to a friend. This is just my thoughts for 2023. I like to hold myself accountable. I want to give these opportunities to essentially, to see how these pan out. As I said, my prediction in 2021 for 2022 is pretty accurate. So let's see what happens in 2023, and I'll do a summary video explaining what I got right, what I got wrong, and what I learned. So yeah, my name's Neil Doig. I'm the founder of Money Tips, Tax, Investment, Property, Pension, Saving. So we're different. We offer a new and unique solution. We guide, not advise. We offer money coaching to empower you to make your own decisions with money. I've got a book called Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. Head over to moneytips.org. Tips spelled 2 P's. You've got loads of free resources there. And I also have online courses. I have this Millennial Money Mindset YouTube channel and Millennial Money Mindset podcast. And you might be following me on Money Tips on TikTok. So thanks so much. And yeah, please like, please subscribe. And